Hello, iconic patrons, fans, subscribers, and people who love Glorantha. This is Exploring Glorantha. This is technically our October episode of Exploring Glorantha, but technical difficulties, Mostali's gremlins have plagued me just endlessly. But we think we've got it all sorted out. So I'm here with my unduplicatable co-host, Evan. Evan, welcome back to Exploring Glorantha.
Always glad to be back.
Um, so today and later this month, we're going to look at the first two Cults of Runequest books that came out, the Lightbringers and the Earth Goddesses. I'll probably do a review on the mythology book on Behind the Screen. So if you haven't checked out Behind the Screen, go check it out. We're like 140 some odd episodes into it. I think it's a great show. I'll make sure that I get the mythology review up sooner than we have in our schedule. Because the other thing is, a lot of people have said, hey, we like the reviews of the new Chaosium books, but we really more enjoy your discussion of the world at large. And we've got to get into the second age. So I think we're going to do these two discussions this month. We're going to take December off like we normally do. And then in January, we actually have a question that was sent in by one of our fans that we're going to look at. And then we're going to get back to our exploration of the second age. No, the third age. No, the second age. I'm right. I know what's going on. I just read this morning. Why is this? Anyway, go back and check out some of our earlier episodes because we're going to be talking about the Lightbringers. Get this beautiful cover in display. Episode 6, we talk about the Lightbringer quest. Episode 10, we talk about the Storm Pantheon. And that's basically what this book is about. Evan, I feel like I've done enough introduction. So why don't you tell us what are the Cults of RuneQuest books and what are we going to be looking at today?
Yeah. Well, so the Cults of RuneQuest books, the series is a very in-depth look at a whole series of pantheons, and we start in terms of a detailed deep dive into Pantheon with the Lightbringers, and we're going to see almost a dozen of these, along with the Prosopedia, which we discussed last episode, and the mythology book, to give a framework to the world and provide more granularity on the mechanics for the RuneQuest game, but also a lot more depth in the discussion of the involvement of these cults as organizations, as social phenomena, as the fundamental building blocks of society in the world. And so we particularly get a focus on, of course, the core region that has been opened up in the RuneQuest game for Glorantha, which is Central Genertella and Dragon Pass, Prax, moving up into the southern part of Peloria, and soon, that whole sort of central region is going to be very detailed with all of these books through next year and maybe extending into 2025, perhaps, depending
they've
on
got 4 of them out
publishing
already.
schedules.
Yeah, 4 of them out. The lunar book is first quarter next year, I think.
Yeah. So it's moving along at a good clip, and these are not the only things that are going to be coming out from Chaosium to officially support the game. And then there's, of course, a ton of things coming out from the Johnstown Compendium, and this will continue to, I think, push that, because these provide the firm foundation for applying all of this new information, or refined. Some of it is not. Some of it is old. Some of it is traces to the origins of the game and the world and the concepts from Greg Stafford. But
I was just saying, there's some material that I recognized from the Stafford library books in the new
Yeah.
mythology book.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to kind of pause here and say the reason that they're doing such a large series of books on the mythology of Glorantha is, as Evan said, it's the foundation of the game and the world. The setting information is important, but I would say, unlike, say, the Forgotten Realms or Axia, the game that I'm running for Evan, or Aired by Castles and Crusades, the world lore is not as important to understanding the grand concepts of Glorantha as much as the mythology is important. Like the mythology is the foundation for everything that comes after, including how the world works, right? Rivers don't flow downstream to the ocean or downhill to the ocean because of geography, which they would in most other games, but they flow down to the ocean because of the myth of Magasta calling all of the fiefs to help battle chaos.
Yeah. So we're getting a very good foundation, and even though they were very clear that um, a lot of the other regions that are sort of not the northern continent and with the focus on the sort of core area are going to be covered later in detail with more regional settings, and those are, much farther down in the production line. There are a lot of ties and sort of previews. One of the things that happens very much in these cult discussions is, oh, by the way, the God learners discovered that this god is also this other god that's in Pomatella, or that is in Krallarella. And here are some things that are, unique about how that god is perceived and worshipped, and its involvement in society there. So I think this is most particularly stands out for Pomatella, that in fact, I think when you get through the Lightbringer and even more particularly the Earth Goddess
Yes.
books, you're going to have a good outline for some of the key concepts and deities that operate in Pomatella, and I think some people are gonna take that and run,
Yeah.
which is very exciting.
Oh, 100%.
And there's going to be official foundation for that. So there's these books are going to offer us a lot in terms of what we have here in the Lightbringer book. Um, One thing to note is that, more than half of the gods that were covered in the old original Cults of Prax appear here. It's sort of again that core of the cults that you need to run adventures are present here, and then a lot of other interesting deities that provide other adventuring options, as well as just other, filling out the world options from the dominant culture of central Genertella, which is the Orlanthi culture. And it gives their worldview, it gives their, discussion of their social structure and the roles that these various religious cults play, and how they interrelate and how they compete. But it goes beyond that. We go all the way out to some of the more obscure storm gods like Ig, who wouldn't be important at all, say, in the second age for central Genertella, but he's the patron of the wolf pirates, and the sort of de facto high priest for Ig is Herrick the Berserk.
Herrick the Berserk.
And the wolf pirates circumnavigated the world, and then, around the ocean, and then have shown up, and they are power players in the hero wars. And so even though he's an obscure god from the west up in northwest Frenella, he's important, but that also opens a whole view onto this strange faraway kind of piratical culture up in the far removed north near in the frozen seas. So uh, the book offers a lot, just some core foundational things, but I found, just about on every page a suggestion for an adventure, an idea for complications or rewards. And even if most of your players are like, well, we just want to play Orlanth and
Right.
Arnalda worshippers, it provides uh, all of the webs of relationship that make the play in Glorantha, whether you're playing RuneQuest, because of course all of the descriptive materials I think you can carry over to other expressions. If you're going to play in Glorantha in some other, with 13th Age,
Mm-hmm.
or with Quest Worlds, or some other homebrew approach, like the old Pendragon Pass, or people have converted Savage Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
These All of the information is very applicable. It enriches the play, and again provides that very detailed, purposeful uh, uh, motivations for your characters. They're not. I mean, you can play a group of just rootless mercenaries,
Yep.
but but then the context for that is also defined.
Yep.
What does that? How do you relate to the societies who are tightly bound, who are linked by kinship and shared political, social, and religious belief, and how are you viewed, versus coming from inside that society, and how you relate to your aunt, who is the wise woman, and your cousin, who is the thane, is the champion of the chief, etc. And so it it does what Glorantha does best, which is provides tools for very enriched, detailed play. So
Yes. And so what? And again, this is we're doing these out of order as the books would recommend, because the
yeah,
mythology book really kind of sets itself up as the first book in the series, kind of explaining a lot of this. But each of the cults answers fundamental questions about the people who are for the people who follow after them. So the questions you're going to see repeated kind of throughout these books, and by these books I mean Lightbringers and Earth Goddesses. Where does the world come from? Every cult has a explanation of where the world came from. Where did I come from? Like I as humanity. What happens when we die? Or why do we die? What happens after we die? What am I supposed to do here in this life? Where does magic come from and how do I do it? Who are these other gods? Where do we rule? And they basically provide the social tapestry for people in this cult on how they view the world. In the mythology book, they talk about like the four great reconciliations that belonging to a cult reconciles you to yourself by telling you here's who created you, here's why you're here, here's what you're supposed to do, and here's what happens after you die. It reconciles you to the cosmos, so you understand how the universe works. It reconciles you to community, because everyone in your cult, you have a common framework. I think the fourth one is it reconciles you to metaphysics, like to the gods. How do I interact with the god and magic? Um, Now, practically, so first of all, these may sound like really scholastic, nerdy books, and let me assure you, if that's what you're looking for, they are. But they also are very practical and usable. As we talked about in the Prosopedia, basically the Cults of RuneQuest, you don't have to read the whole book. You have to read the part that is most relevant to your game. If you're a player and you follow Orlanth, all you really have to read is the Cult of Orlanth, and you get a good feel for everything that you need to know. As a game master, if you know that when the book comes out, you know that the group is going to be fighting a group of um, brew who worship Theed, you don't need to read the whole Chaos book. You just need to read the Theed section to get a feel for how to flavor this thing. So there really are more reference books. Now, Evan and I, being the nerds that we are and running the podcast as we do, we're doing the legwork for you. We're reading through all of these cover to cover, taking extensive notes, and not relating most of them, as we are wont to do on Exploring Glorantha. But you'll get our notes if you are a member of the iconic Patreon, which I'm just going to put a plug in here. Go over to patreon.com/iconic. If you are not a member of the Patreon, we've got some great rewards. We're going to be revamping it all in January, but you get to come and hang out with us on Discord, and you get access to Evan's notes. And his show notes, they're like the cliff notes of whatever we're discussing. So, practically, you find out what background skills, what cult benefits, and what spells are gifted to your to people who follow the cult. So essentially, imagine the cult chapter in the RuneQuest Glorantha book, and each one of those entries just blown up. So you get more context for how they interact with the world, who their associate gods are, who they have rivalry with, what are their spirits of vengeance like, and mechanically, if I'm following this cult, what benefits do I get as a player? Because at the end of the day, that's what our players want. They want to know, why is following this god, what does it get for me? And I'm sure there's very materialist outlook, but even I think, that was, if you go back and look at the ancient Near East, Greg's onto something. That's how they did it. Why do we worship Baal? Well, because if we worship Baal, Baal brings the rains and the crops grow and the animals and the people are fertile. That's why we worship him. We don't worship him because we enjoy doing this stuff. We do it because what do we as humans get out of our relationship with the god? And Evan just has here a single line, all caps, with an exclamation point. I think he toned it down. I think in the original outline, there's like bright, like multicolors and like underlined and like little explosions. It just says art. Evan, would you like to expound upon your monosyllabic entry into our show notes?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's gorgeously illustrated. Now, the main thing is that for each of the featured deities, some of which I think have never been portrayed before,
Mm-hmm.
there is a gorgeous illustration. And then throughout the text, there are additional illustrations, many of which are sort of in the form of in-game, like this is an idol or a mosaic or
Mm-hmm.
a frieze or a statue that you would see in the world somewhere. And some of them are not representational. They're symbols or attributes,
Mm-hmm.
an implement or a tool associated with the god. So you start to get the vocabulary of the iconography, the symbols, colors, the scheme that evokes the deity. And so this is another thing that brings texture and depth to the play, and allows for you can play at different levels, but it's good to be sort of conversant with that if you're running the game, and if you're playing, to be able to lean into these things as well. And so for a lot of these cults, it's the first time that we've seen any sort of portrayal. And even for Orlanth, who is one of the cults that comes in the RQ1, RQ2 booklet. There's Orlanth, Kyger Lator, and Black Fang were the sort of random and yet evocative and important cult write-ups that they gave as examples. There's still surprising and additional and gorgeous portrayals of the gods that tell you how the mortals conceive of these beings that rule the destinies of and contribute to the heroic path of the characters. Um, so the art is great. I mean, I think the only thing, even though it took a very long time to finalize all of this art,
Yeah.
for all of the very skilled and imaginative artists, and you still get through and you're like, oh, I wish I had a few more pieces
I
of that
know.
art, because it's so great.
I think I
And
mentioned in the
yeah,
Prosopedia episode how I was sort of disappointed on how sparse the art was in the Prosopedia. That's because they saved it for these books. And
yeah,
I mean, I'm gonna do a review with lots of pictures and behind the screen of the mythology book.
yeah.
Mythology book start to finish is just exceptionally beautiful. Like these all are. Like we are living in a
And
wonderful RuneQuest and wonderful Gloranthan time to be alive. If you are fans of this world, you
yeah,
will. These are beautiful books that of the like we have not seen, and like I love like right the Guide to Glorantha was like my high water mark, even into the first several years of RuneQuest. The new RuneQuest in Glorantha, which I thought were great looking books, but the guide was still sort of like here. And then RuneQuest, the new RuneQuest books. I would argue that these cults of RuneQuest book have supplanted, at least in my opinion, the beauty of the guide to Glorantha. Like just the lavish attention to detail and art is spectacular.
yeah. And this is not a complaint about the art at all. This is just, the
Like a lunar would preface it.
like you, it's like going into a restaurant and having just a totally delectable meal, and then just wishing that you could have, a second helping.
Yeah.
That
Or that
I
my
would like
stomach was larger. That I
I
could
would like more of that.
yes.
But it would cost more, it would delay the books more. We understand you have to make a decision. But the bottom line is, well done, Chaosium.
Yes.
Keep it up. This is art that is going to, in many ways, sort of revolutionizes our understanding, and
Mhm.
I think it helps us understand that there's a lot of description, the reading, the
Mhm.
details. This is what the cult does, here are the game mechanics, etc. But the relationship of understanding of, on a different kind of level, on an emotional level, on imaginative level, the art connects us to that
Yeah.
in another rich way. And they've just, the art direction has been great, and the artists have been brilliant. So
Brilliant. Yeah. And I think I mean they mentioned this in the mythology book, right? That icons are an important aspect of worship, which is kind of right. There's this discussion in mythology book. I did a paper on this, but that worship is sort of kind of mankind's like the middle world's kind of default mode for the longest time of interacting with the world. And images are a part of that. Um, and they can be a part of it by absence as well. There are several traditions in the world who refuse to use any imagery, and that itself defines and dictates their worship. So, as you might expect, in a book titled The Lightbringers, it covers in depth the Lightbringers. So we have entries on Orlanth with, touching on Vinga and Chalana Arroy and Ermal and Isries and Lankar Mai. But this is also, the Lightbringers are really Storm Tribes kind of exemplars, if you will. And so the rest of the book covers other storm cults that are important kind of in this central and western Genertella. I mean, I can just read through the list and then we've got Barntar. Barntar. If there was a god whose worshippers got made fun of ubiquitously in my RuneQuest game, it was the followers of Barntar. It was sort of like those who can initiate as Orlanth, those who can't follow Bartar. They just, my players talking right to Becca and Josh and Beth and Corey. You guys made fun of Barntar initiates far too often. Daka Fell, the image of Daka Fell in this book is gorgeous. Foundchild, Gagarth, Heller, Humoct, Lambril, Mostikos, I can do this. Odela, Stormbull, Valind, Waha, Ig, and Yinkin. Just an explosive amount of, and some of these are new cults for your players who are in, in the world. Luckily, as I've mentioned several times before, I had the preview copy from Gen Con back when this was going to be one book. Oh, those innocent days when they thought they could fit everything in one book. So some of these, but some of these are new. They've been added in, even from the stuff I've had. So like, I had the rules for Initiates of Barntar. Not that anybody wanted to play it. I feel like the god of farming is just like, he's just the most reliable and dependable god. And like, I would want to be an Initiate of Barntar, so I took it a little personally when my players were like, Barntar, what a maroon. So now we have all of this great information. And but like we kind of covered it. We can't go into every cult. This is only an hour show. Go to the God Learners podcast. They're the ones who do deep dives and like very esoteric things. What did we learn?
And they are covering these books.
They are covering these books. This is and here's the thing. We love Ludo and the guys over at God Learners. My biggest regret from all of this medical stuff and health stuff that I did is I didn't get to do the 13th Age episode, which was spectacular. You and Becca did an amazing job. But just a twinge of jealousy from my sickbed. So what do we learn? High level, Evan, what does this book bring to the table for RuneQuest GMs and players?
Well, so it sort of solidifies this idea of the, that, like 80% of society are concentrated on, the most popular cults. It's going to be, and the male cult are the Orlanth, Orlanth Thunderous, which is a more farming atmosphere, weather related, in Orlanth Adventurous, which is more of the warrior cult. Orlanth is so big that he has so many, like essentially separate cults.
Yeah, there are like 5 or 6 that are talked about in this book.
Right. And that, when we get to the Earth Goddesses, Ernalda is the main patron of women in society, and it's a Bronze Age society. It depends on this separation of
church and state.
Of labor and of roles in society, and that's a reproduction of sort of the mythic world. But of course, God time was more complicated. So while we've got the 80 or 90% that is like that, then for what's likely to be playable and a motivation to adventurers who, by their definition, are not the normal people in society. Right. The normal people in society stay on the farm. They're reliable.
They don't go out and deal with bandits or delve, dwarf tombs or fight werewolves.
Exactly. So, even the warriors following Orlanth Adventurous, they're not, most of them, that adventurous. They go out and do, maybe one thing, and then, they're there to run the militia, to protect the boundaries, to make sure that people, enemies who come in, but they're not, going out into society, even though that is the sort of central myth of the Lightbringers. I mean, if you want to talk about, the model adventuring group, it's the Lightbringers. Yeah. Oh, we got a smart guy. We got a guy who knows how to find his way around things. We got a healer.
We got the face, the talker. We got the big bully.
exactly. We've got a tricks, a tricky guy
Yep.
who we got to keep an eye on, but he's not that reliable, but he's important. And then we've got the big, the tank, um, and then the couple of Lightbringers, the other two who don't receive direct worship but are associated, Fleshman and Ginajar or Genajar, who may also be Arachne Solara, who might be the ghost of Glorantha. There's still mysteries around that. So there is this tradition, and it but it's extraordinary, but it can channel people who want to do these things, which may be in some ways somewhat antisocial, to be, even more than your typical Bronze Age associated with fighting and death and killing things. Let's channel that, towards the dangers that threaten society. And then there are all these other expressions, and we find these in these other cults outside of the sort of the five Lightbringers, and we have almost all of Praxian society is captured in some of these cults, because of they're associated with the Lightbringers. They're tied to the
Mm-hmm.
Storm tribe, but they're this local expression around Stormbull, uh, um, Found Child,
See,
Dakafal, and Waha. Um,
I was just gonna say, for me,
yeah,
Found Child, I love Found Child, and if I remember correctly, which I may not, Evan will correct me here if I'm wrong. My first interaction and discovery of Found Child was in Borderlands. Is that the one that takes place in Balorzine? No, Griffin
so
Mountain. That's the one
Griffin
I'm thinking
Mountain.
of. Yeah,
So
Griffin
yeah,
Mountain.
so yes, Found Child, I think, originally shows up as a cult in Balanzar because it's a hunting society, and he
Yes,
he is one of the hunting gods.
and I
And
just like just to get cool art of Found Child because Griffin Mountain was so like
yeah,
uh,
yeah, no, this fills out things that have been in, but Found Child also is in
mhm.
Borderlands because he's the hunting god. So for the non-herding peoples,
Yes.
there are hunters like the Men in a Half
Yep.
live by hunting. There are several other groups out on the plains, and there are occasionally the weird tribe members, um who otherwise would be herders and raiders, and the bisons or the high yamas, etc. But there are a few weirdos who like to go out hunting too, and you kind of need to be able to rely on them as well,
Hmm.
because they can find their way around in this harsh environment, so you tolerate even though that they are sort of outside the norm. And Found Child is their hunting god. But there are a couple of other hunting gods, of
Hmm.
course. Odila,
Yes.
um, who is the bear god, but the bear god who's tied into the Storm tribe,
Hmm.
who might also be, the same bear god, might be in sort of different societies. But maybe not. It's uh, uh, but And then Yinkin is also, I mean, the
Hmm.
cat is also a hunter. So you have the bear hunter, you have the cat hunter, and then you have the Found Child, who's sort of the survivor, in the greater darkness and afterwards. Um, so you have all of these different social roles defined. We have Prax, that's sort of almost, at least all of the roles that sort of lean masculine. That
Hmm.
doesn't exclude, again, for adventurers are extraordinary,
Hmm.
but the tendency is that they are attract more male worshipers, and then we will see sort of the other half of that in the Earth Goddesses book, because the Earth is still, even though it's blasted in Prax, is still important with the herds and the herd mother, and the surviving cultivatable areas like the oases still have Ernalda's power, etc. But we get, sort of half of that here, and then a lot of other important roles that are important both socially, but important from an adventuring standpoint too. Of course, we've got Humak, which is the major storm god, the god who is so devoted to honor that he knew that he had to be impartial, and so he severed his storm god ties, because wielding death, he couldn't, it would break his honor to show favoritism, to say, oh well, I am death, but I'm going to protect my family, and not, I'm going to deal it sort of unevenly. So he severs his ties, and so he's the honorable warrior, and there are various expressions, and again we get some richness, the description of the Humakti who develop out of the captive population in the Grazelands, who become the bodyguards of the Feathered Horse Queen. Again, it's a detail that enriches an area of different interactions of cultures and society, that help deepen our play, and again fill out the world. Landbrol is an important, particularly like an urban cult. Landbrol is the person, they're cast out on the one hand because they are those who would steal from kin. That this is the thief god. This is a deceiver, and someone who commits a lot of antisocial behavior. On the other hand, they're not a friend of chaos. Again, chaos is the enemy of
The
all.
great
So
enemy, yeah.
they have a certain honor, and the cult structures sort of organized crime in an area, which is sort of fascinating. Again, it's the parallel society for outcasts in many ways, and yet they reproduce a different kind of structure that's built on a different kind of honor, and the cult goes further than any description before, and it was published in the Pavis materials long ago for RuneQuest 2. But now we have even more details, and you could build an entire campaign
Around
just
a
around
cult. Yeah, and there's enough
running running
information.
running Landbrol
Yeah.
as a as the central social glue in some great city. Notchet, of course, comes to mind because it's the biggest city in central Gannertella, but you could have Landbrol thieves in Boldholm, or certainly Pavis.
Yeah.
So just to capture some of the other social roles that are provided, Gagarth is an outlaw god, and he's very bad. He does horrible, cruel things, but for someone who's been cast out,
He provides
you
a new center when
right,
you're out on the edges of society.
right.
This is
It's
something that provides a new center to build a community around.
Yeah, it's brutal and exploitive, and cruel, for the outlaw who is like, I'm not going back. I'm not planning on taking back up with regular society. It is a refuge for ne'er-do-wells in many ways, and yet it provides a foil. This may not be a cult that you would typically find in your heroic adventuring parties, but uh, he exists because he still plays a role in the world, and he's still a kinsman of Orlanth, and so he has to be acknowledged, and there has to be some um, relationship, even though there is this uh, terribly antisocial. It's like sort of the antithesis of what you would expect from normal functioning Orlanthe society. So we really get a very comprehensive view, and um, and people should not talk down Barntar either. Of course, he's
No,
the
come on.
stalwart.
He
He's the
is.
stalwart, and he's also, when Orlanth is forbidden, Barntar usually is not, because they still need you to be productive. And Barntar is Orlanth's son, and he has, a combination of heroic attributes, both of his mother Ernalda and his father Orlanth. And when the heroes cult is suppressed or driven out, the farmers rise up,
Yeah.
heroes emerge.
Yeah.
And so we see that, and the importance of that. And it's interesting, of course. I don't think, for example, Harmast Barefoot, who was the first mortal to do the Lightbringers quest, he was always known as the farmer. Like
Mm-hmm.
he came up as a farmer, and Orlanth, he wasn't initiated, and he came up at a time when you couldn't be initiated into the cult of Orlanth, because um, the big bad guy would show up and kill you. Um, but it's very probable that all of his early education
Initiations.
and initiations were through Barntar. And then he took on the hero mantle and was initiated into Orlanth. So we get to see a lot of richness, and you want to like talk about a Heller. Heller's
Oh,
the
okay.
rain god, um, and as an adventuring cult, it's going to be a challenge, but it's going to appeal to some people and say, yeah, I want to, this is a companion of Orlanth. It plays a very important role in bringing rain and health and fertility to communities. And maybe you have an adventure that centers around the threats to that, whether it's drought or other um, plagues or other oppression of society, that this god that is involved in fertility and cleansing would be of particular effectiveness against those sorts of dangers. And so the book offers just a lot of options, and there are the mechanics and the spells and
Oh
all
yeah.
the things that you need to uh to run each of these cults effectively in their roles, and build heroes out of, and so it vastly increases our knowledge and the options that are available for play.
Well, and I think what it does is it deepens our ability to play in this world,
Agreed.
right? Kind of one of the trends in a lot of games is that the next splat book increases the power level, and we're not seeing that with right. We're seeing a depth. Hey, let's look at this god and let's look at this way to play the game and this kind of a character. And so I think it enriches our ability to experience the world of Glorantha. Because, and I'll be talking about this with Alexander on Monday. I'm going to be doing another episode of um, Beyond the Table and talking with Alexander McCrease of Adventurer Conqueror King, and he's going to be doing a second edition of his. He's got a second edition of his game, and I want to talk with him. And he's a big proponent of simulationism as a valid style of role playing games. And the thing is, RuneQuest is a simulationist game. Its goal is to give you a framework by which you can immerse yourself in the world
Yeah.
of Glorantha. And these books just deepen the pool for us. Now,
Yeah.
as a new player, please don't be turned off by the idea of these books. Like, oh my gosh, this is just more lore for me to learn. No, this is equivalent to just reading some. I mean, honestly, it's equivalent to reading some stories that your character most likely heard told to them, and it gives you some more context, some more anchor points. I think one of the best explanations of uh, RuneQuest versus Dungeons and Dragons as our lingua franca in the RPG industry is that in most games you play itinerant wanderers, um, going from adventurer to adventurer, just kind of wherever the wind carries them. And in RuneQuest, you are defined by who your parents are, who your family is, who your community is, and from that sense of community, then you go out and do. So instead of being rootless, Glorantha wants you to be rooted in all of the things that make your adventuring in defense of something worth preserving. And this just gives you more of those anchor points for your character going forward.
Yeah. That's absolutely right.
Any
And
any final thoughts there, Evan?
um I think, well, as you were saying, the splat books and the power gaming and stuff. I mean, we already have, the powerful cult is Orlanth. If you want the king of the gods, and the big adventurer, the person who makes the big mistakes and then has the big wins, you have that, and that's here. But as you said, this is more about enriching play and rewarding, finding those ties to community. And even if it's not your parents in your home village, etc., it's your mercenary troop. It's even with Gagarth. Again, you can't survive without community, and so even if it's a community of cutthroat outlaws, you still find a way to form that group, because virtually no person, Hark the Berserk perhaps, is the exception that proves the rule, but even he, surrounds himself with pirates and things, can survive on their own.
Right.
And so that's the lesson, is that community and structure is foundational, and this book helps to further operationalize that play.
Yeah.
And gives you rewards and gives you goals and gives you a ton of adventure hooks. So and the Lightbringers are the template adventuring group, and the Lightbringer quest, the template of the cycle of adventure and world renewal and everything. So this is a great place to start. Most of your exciting warrior adventuring needs will be fulfilled by this book, and it will just give you a lot of ideas and tools to go forward.
Well, that brings us to an end of this episode, and bear with us because we are going to do one on the Earth Goddess because we're just so excited about these books. But I promise, in 2024, we're going to get back into our more standard programming, if you will. Evan, thank you so much for, as always, putting the outlines together, your tireless research. I'm just here to talk and look good. You really do the heavy lifting. I feel like I just insulted you.
We're a team.
We're a team. We're a team.
We're in that community.
That's right.
We depend on each other.
Isseries and Lankor Mai. venturing together through Glorantha.
Laurel
So
and Hardy.
that's right. Ooh, I'll take it. I'll take it. Abbott and Costello. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. We'll be back in actually only a couple of weeks with our regularly scheduled and streamed episode of Exploring Glorantha. So until then, have a good one, everybody.